The chain snapped tight as the horse collapsed, choking against the tree just as distant engines roared closer through the dust. The wind carried the sound of trucks racing toward the field, voices shouting something urgent, something angry. The animal didn't fight anymore. It just stood there, trembling, as if it already knew what was coming. And then the farmer saw the wounds and realized this wasn't what anyone thought it was. Dust rolled low across the edge of the field, thin as smoke, while the sound of engines carried over the dry Kansas land in broken waves. Ethan Mercer lifted his head from the fence post he had been checking and stood still, listening. It was not unusual to hear trucks on the county road. It was unusual to hear them coming fast. He set the hammer down on the top rail and looked toward the far line of cottonwoods where his property narrowed into rough pasture. The wind shifted. Along with the smell of sunburned grass and old cedar, something sharper reached him: sweat, mud, and the bitter scent of an animal under strain. Then came the sound that tightened his chest. Not a full whinny, not even a cry, just one broken pull of breath. Ethan moved at once, boots striking hard through the weeds as he cut across the pasture. Barbed wire sagged between leaning posts to his left. To his right, the late afternoon sun flashed dull gold across the pond that had shrunk almost to mud by August. He didn't think. He simply followed that ragged breathing, the way a man follows thunder when he knows lightning has already touched down somewhere nearby. The ground dipped near a crooked elm at the edge of the old boundary line. That was where he saw it. A pale horse stood with its front legs spread wide, body shaking so violently it looked ready to fold. A length of heavy chain ran from its neck to the trunk of the tree, wound twice and locked so tightly into the bark that the metal had bitten deep. The horse's head hung low, but not in rest, in defeat. Each breath dragged through its throat with a raw, scraping sound that made Ethan's own neck tighten in answer. For one stunned second, he only stared. The animal was lean enough to show the shadows between its ribs. Dust had turned its coat the color of dirty bone, though patches of brighter white still shone through at the shoulder and flank. Its mane was tangled with burrs and dried leaves. One knee was dark with mud where it had gone down and forced itself back up again, but it was the neck that stopped him cold. The chain had rubbed the skin nearly bare in places. Underneath the dust were marks that did not belong to brush, wire, or weather. Lines crossed the hide in strange directions. Two measured, two repeated. Old marks. Newer ones. Some faint and silvered, some darker, angry, not fully closed. The horse heard him and jerked upright. Panic flashed through its body. It tried to rear, but weakness stole the height from the motion. The chain snapped tight with a hard metallic crack, and the horse stumbled sideways, choking against the pull. "All right, easy," Ethan said, though his own voice came out rough. He raised both hands and stopped where he was. The horse's ears pinned back. Its nostrils opened wide. It was not looking at him the way frightened animals usually did. There was no wild calculation in it, no quick search for escape. There was only exhaustion and something deeper beneath it, something already used up. Ethan let the silence settle. Behind him, the engine sounded nearer now. More than one truck. Gravel spit somewhere beyond the road bend. He glanced once over his shoulder, then back at the animal. Whatever was happening, it was happening fast. He took off his hat and lowered himself slightly, not enough to threaten, just enough to look smaller. "I'm not with them," he said quietly. The horse's sides heaved. Foam clung at the corners of its mouth. One foreleg trembled so hard the hoof tapped the earth in weak, uneven beats. Ethan noticed a dented metal bucket lying on its side near the tree roots, bone dry. No water, no hay, nothing but chain, dust, and heat. A slow anger rose in him, but he kept it down. Anger had no use here. He looked at the lock. Thick, rusted. Newer than the chain itself. Whoever had done this had not tied the horse here to rest. They had left it. The sound of shouting drifted faintly across the field. He couldn't make out the words yet, only the shape of them, urgent, heated, too many voices speaking over one another. The horse heard them too. Its whole body changed. What little stillness it had gathered vanished. It flung its head up, eyes rolling white, and pulled again at the chain with a burst of desperate force. The elm shuddered, metal groaned, skin tore somewhere beneath the collar of lynx. Ethan swore under his breath and moved one step closer before stopping himself. If he rushed in now, the horse might break its own neck trying to get away. "Hey," he called, sharper this time. "Look at me." The animal did not understand the words, but the sound cut through the panic for half a heartbeat, long enough for Ethan to see it clearly. This was no crazed beast, no killer, no destroyer. This was something hunted. He slid his hand slowly into his pocket and found the half apple he had taken from the kitchen that morning and forgotten. He crouched, rolled it across the dirt, and let it stop well short of the horse's hooves. The white head dropped an inch, then lifted again, attention torn between hunger and terror. The shouts grew louder. Now he could hear them. "Over there! Tree line! Don't let it run!" Ethan's jaw set hard. He looked from the trembling horse to the road beyond the pasture gate, where dust was beginning to rise above the grass in thick, moving sheets. He had not yet touched the chain, had not yet cut it, had not yet chosen anything fully. But he already knew one thing. Whatever story those men were bringing with them, it had not started here. And when the horse dragged one shaking hoof backward, not away from him, but away from the voices closing in, Ethan felt something inside him turn. He stepped between the tree and the open field just as the first truck broke into view. Gravel sprayed as the first truck skidded to a stop near the broken gate, its engine still growling like it hadn't decided whether to rest. A second vehicle pulled in behind it, slower but just as deliberate. Doors slammed, boots hit the ground, voices followed, sharp, overlapping, already charged with certainty. Ethan didn't turn right away. He kept his body angled toward the horse, one hand still low at his side, as if any sudden movement might send the animal into another desperate struggle. The chain creaked faintly behind him. He could feel the horse's breath, ragged, uneven, carrying into the quiet space between them. "Ethan!" He recognized the voice. Carl Hensley. Neighbor for 20 years. A man who didn't raise his voice unless he believed he had reason to. Ethan turned then, slowly. Carl stood near the truck, hat pushed back, face tight. Two other men flanked him, faces familiar, though less so. One held a length of rope coiled in his hand. The other scanned the pasture like he expected something to bolt at any second. "That it?" one of them asked. Carl nodded once, eyes flicking past Ethan to the horse. "That's the one." Ethan felt the words settle wrong. "The one," he repeated, not raising his voice. Carl took a few steps forward, stopping short of the tree line. "We've been looking half the morning. That thing's been tearing through fences, spooking cattle clear across Miller's Ridge. Broke 2 gates last night. Nearly ran a herd into the road." Behind Ethan, the horse shifted, not toward the men, but away. Its hooves dragged against the dry ground, weak but urgent. The chain pulled taut, again with a dull, grinding sound. Ethan glanced back at it. The movement wasn't aggressive. It wasn't even defensive. It was fear. He turned back to Carl. "You see it now?" he said quietly. "Does this look like something tearing through anything?" Carl's jaw tightened. "Looks can fool you." Another man stepped forward, the one with the rope, younger, restless. "We don't need to argue about it. We just need to get it handled before it causes more damage." He nodded toward the chain. "Good thing someone already tied it off." Ethan didn't respond to that. His eyes dropped briefly to the metal around the horse's neck, then back up again. "You don't know who did this," he said. "No," Carl answered, "but I know what it's been doing." The words landed heavier than they should have. Ethan exhaled slowly and walked a few steps to the side, giving the horse more space while still keeping himself between it and the men. The younger one noticed. "You planning to keep it?" he asked, a faint edge creeping into his tone. "I'm planning to get it water," Ethan said. He crossed to the fallen bucket, picked it up, and shook the dust from it. Empty, bone dry. He looked toward the truck bed behind him, where he knew a spare jug sat under a tarp. The horse's breathing scraped again, louder now that the air had shifted with more bodies in the clearing. Carl watched him. "Ethan, this isn't a stray dog. You heard what I said. Folks are already on edge." "Folks are always on edge," Ethan replied, without looking at him. That didn't sit well. The second man, older, heavier, shifted his stance. "You weren't out there this morning," he said. "Didn't see what it did." Ethan straightened slowly, the bucket still in his hand. "And you didn't see what I see right now." He stepped closer to the horse again, careful, steady. The animal flinched, but not as violently as before. Its eyes flicked from him to the men and back again, as if measuring distance it didn't have the strength to take. Ethan set the bucket down gently within reach and backed away. "There's no water here," he said. "No feed. Just chain. You telling me something that's been tearing through your land ended up like this on its own?" No one answered immediately. The younger man shifted his grip on the rope. "Doesn't matter how it got here. What matters is what we do with it now." Ethan finally turned fully to face them. "And what's that?" Carl hesitated. Just for a second. Then, "We put it down, or we haul it off before it hurts someone." The words hung in the air, heavy, final. Behind Ethan, the horse made a low sound. Not loud, not wild. Just a tired breath that broke unevenly at the end. It wasn't the sound of something dangerous. It was the sound of something finished. Ethan felt something in his chest shift, not fast, not dramatic, just enough to change the ground beneath his thinking. He walked back to the horse, closer this time. Close enough to see the way the skin along its neck trembled under the chain. Close enough to see the lines again. Those strange, deliberate marks beneath the dust. He reached out. Carl's voice cut in, sharper now. "Ethan, don't." But Ethan's hand didn't stop. His fingers brushed the edge of one of the marks, just below the collar of metal. The horse stiffened, but didn't pull away. Ethan frowned. That wasn't how a wild animal reacted to touch. Not like this. He leaned in slightly, studying the shape beneath his fingertips. Not a tear, not a scrape, a line. Too clean, too even. His stomach tightened. Slowly he drew his hand back, eyes still fixed on the horse's neck. Something wasn't right. Not just with the animal. With the story they were all telling about it. He straightened, turning back toward the men, but this time his expression had changed. "Before anyone decides what this thing is," he said, voice quieter now, but harder, "someone's going to explain these marks." The younger man frowned. "Marks?" Ethan stepped aside just enough to reveal the neck. Carl took a step closer despite himself. And for the first time since arriving, the certainty in his face cracked. Just a little. The men didn't move at first. Dust drifted lazily between them, softening the edges of the moment. But no one spoke. The younger one leaned in slightly, squinting as if distance might change what he was seeing. "What am I supposed to be looking at?" he muttered. Ethan didn't answer. He stepped closer to the horse again, slower this time, giving it room to decide whether to pull away. It didn't. Its head hung low, breath still uneven, but its body no longer strained against the chain. It was as if the fight had drained out of it, leaving only whatever came after. He lifted his hand again, careful, and brushed the dust aside along the line he had touched before. The mark came into view more clearly, not jagged, not random. A narrow, deliberate groove that curved slightly, then stopped. Another lay just beneath it, parallel, spaced almost evenly apart. Fainter scars crossed farther back along the shoulder, repeating in a pattern that felt intentional. Carl stepped closer despite himself, boots crunching over dry grass. "That's barbed wire, maybe," he said, but there was less confidence in it now. Ethan shook his head. "No wire does that clean." The older man shifted uneasily. "Could have gotten tangled, pulled free." "Then where are the tears?" Ethan asked quietly. "Where's the ripping? Where's the mess?" No one answered. The horse flinched when a breeze passed over its neck, but it didn't recoil from Ethan's hand. That was the part that settled heavy in his chest. Wild animals didn't accept touch like that, not unless something in them had been changed or taken. A new sound broke through the stillness, the distant hum of another engine, slower this time, followed by the crunch of tires easing over gravel instead of tearing across it. All heads turned. A faded pickup rolled up near the gate and stopped. The door opened, and a woman stepped out, brushing dust from her jeans as she moved. She carried a small case in one hand, worn leather, practical. "Grace?" Carl said, almost relieved. "Good. We called her on the way." Ethan exhaled under his breath. That, at least, was something. Grace Miller walked toward them without rushing, her eyes already scanning the scene. The chain, the horse, the way the men stood back rather than forward. She didn't ask questions right away. She simply took it in. "Let me see," she said. Ethan stepped aside, but didn't move far. He stayed within reach of the horse, one hand still low, steady, a quiet presence more than anything else. Grace approached slowly, angling her body the way someone did when they understood animals better than words. She didn't reach out immediately. She circled just enough to catch the light across the horse's side, then crouched slightly, studying the lines along its neck and shoulder. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she let out a quiet breath. "These aren't from the land," she said. The younger man frowned. "Then what?" Grace didn't look up. She traced the air just above one of the scars, not touching, but following its line. "They're too consistent, too controlled." She shifted slightly, examining another set. Same depth, same spacing. Carl crossed his arms, uneasy. "You saying someone did that?" Grace finally straightened and met his eyes. "I'm saying it didn't happen by accident." The words settled into the group like a weight no one wanted to carry. The older man shook his head. "Doesn't change what it's been doing." Grace glanced at him. "You saw it do those things yourself?" He hesitated. "Heard enough." Ethan caught that, held on to it. Grace stepped back toward him, lowering her voice just enough that the others had to lean in to hear. "It's dehydrated," she said. "Exhausted. Whatever strength it had, it burned through it before it ended up here." Ethan nodded once. That part he had already seen. She continued, quieter still. "And these marks, they're not just old. Some of them are recent." A slow, cold feeling spread through him. "Recent?" he asked. She nodded. The horse shifted again, its weight uneven, one leg trembling more than before. Ethan instinctively reached for the bucket, glancing toward his truck. "I'm getting water," he said. No one stopped him this time. He moved quickly, grabbing the jug from the truck bed and filling the bucket halfway before carrying it back. The horse watched him the whole way, not with panic now, but with something else, something wary but anchored. He set the bucket down within reach and stepped back. It hesitated. Then, slowly, it lowered its head. The first sip was shallow, uncertain. The second, deeper. Then the horse drank with a quiet urgency, each swallow pulling life back into its body in subtle, visible increments. The men watched in silence. Carl shifted his weight again, eyes flicking between the horse and the marks along its neck. The certainty that had brought him here was thinning, unraveling at the edges. Grace folded her arms, thoughtful. "Whatever story you've been told," she said, not accusing, just stating, "it's not the whole one." Ethan looked at the horse as it drank, water dripping from its muzzle back into the dust. He didn't feel relief. Not yet. Just a growing sense that the truth wasn't going to make anything easier. Because if this animal hadn't started the trouble everyone believed it had, then something else had. And it wasn't standing here, chained to a tree. The bucket rocked slightly as the horse lifted its head, water trailing from its mouth in thin streams that darkened the dust beneath. For a brief moment, the clearing felt quieter, like something fragile had been allowed to exist without interruption. Then the younger man stepped forward again. "That doesn't change anything," he said, voice firmer now, as if the pause had unsettled him. "It's still the same animal." Ethan didn't respond right away. He watched the horse instead, the way its breathing had slowed just enough to hold steady, the way it no longer leaned against the chain quite so hard. Small changes, but real. Behind him, Carl exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck. "Grace says it didn't happen out there," he muttered. "Fine, but that doesn't explain what folks have been seeing." Grace shifted her stance, her tone calm, but edged now. "What people think they've seen isn't always the same as what actually happened." The older man shook his head. "You weren't there when Miller's cattle broke through the north fence. You didn't see how they ran." "And you didn't see what made them run," Grace replied. The tension sharpened. Ethan felt it move through the group like a current, no longer just concern but something heavier. Pride. Fear. The need to be right. He stepped away from the horse, just enough to face them fully. "So, what happens now?" he asked. The younger man didn't hesitate. "We take it in. Get it off the land before it causes more damage. If it can't be handled—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Carl looked at Ethan. "You know how this goes. If something's been causing trouble, we don't wait around for it to get worse." Ethan nodded once, slowly. He did know. That was the problem. The wind picked up slightly, pushing dry grass in low waves around their boots. Somewhere in the distance, a gate banged against its hinge. The horse flinched at the sound, its body tightening again, not with strength but with reflex. Ethan glanced back at it. It wasn't preparing to charge. It was bracing. He turned back to the men. "You're asking me to hand over something that can barely stand?" "It stood enough to get where it's been," the older man replied. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're not listening." "No," the younger man shot back, stepping closer. "You're not. You're seeing what you want to see." That struck deeper than it should have. For a second, Ethan almost let it land, almost stepped aside, almost told himself it wasn't his problem. He had lived long enough without trouble, long enough keeping his head down, fixing fences, minding his own ground, letting the world do what it would beyond his boundaries. It would be easier. It always was. Behind him, the chain gave a faint, dragging sound as the horse shifted again. Ethan didn't need to turn to know what it looked like. Head low, body tired, waiting for whatever came next. Not fighting, not anymore. That quiet reached him in a way the voices hadn't. Grace spoke again, softer this time. "Ethan, if they take it now, it won't matter what caused those marks." He knew what she meant. Once something was labeled a problem, the cause stopped mattering. Only the outcome did. Carl stepped forward, not aggressive, but firm. "We're not trying to make this harder than it has to be. Just step aside, let us handle it." The words weren't cruel. That was what made them worse. They were reasonable, practical, the kind of words people used when they didn't want to think too long about what they were doing. Ethan looked at Carl, really looked at him, a man he had known half his life, a man who would lend tools without asking, who would show up when storms hit, who believed in doing what needed to be done. And right now, Carl believed this needed to be done. Ethan felt something shift inside him again, but this time it didn't stop halfway. He turned, walking back toward the tree. Slowly, deliberately. The men watched. confusion flickering across their faces. "Ethan?" Carl called. He didn't answer. He stopped beside the horse, close enough now that he could feel the heat of its body through the dry air. The animal tensed slightly, then stilled, as if recognizing something in the way he moved. Ethan reached for the chain, not gently, not hesitantly. He gripped it near the base where it wrapped around the trunk, fingers closing over cold, rusted metal. He tested the tension, felt how deep it had bitten into the bark, how firmly it had been fixed. Behind him, boots shifted. "What are you doing?" the younger man demanded. Ethan didn't turn. He just spoke. "If I'm wrong," he said, voice steady, "then it's on me." The words settled into the space between them, heavy and final. He adjusted his grip, finding the weak point where rust had thinned the link just enough. Carl's voice came again, sharper now. "Ethan, think about this." He was thinking, more clearly than he had in a long time. He thought about the marks, about the empty bucket, about the way the horse had leaned away from voices but not from him, about how easy it would be to step back and let this follow the path everyone expected, and about what that would make him. He tightened his grip on the chain. Metal creaked under the strain. The horse shifted beside him but didn't pull away. Ethan took a breath, then another, and in that narrow space between hesitation and action, he chose. The rusted link didn't give at first. Ethan tightened his grip, jaw set, feeling the metal bite into his palm as he shifted his hold for leverage. The chain groaned low against the tree, a tired, stubborn sound, like something that had held too long and didn't know how to let go. Behind him, boots scraped forward. "Ethan, stop!" Carl said, sharper now. "You don't know what you're doing." Ethan didn't look back. "That's exactly why I am," he answered. He braced his foot against the base of the trunk and pulled harder. The weakened link strained, bending just enough to show it wasn't unbreakable. The horse stiffened beside him, muscles tightening in anticipation, not of attack, but of impact. It had learned to expect pain when pressure came. Ethan felt that. "Easy," he murmured, more to the animal than the men behind him. "Just a second." The younger man stepped closer. "You cut that thing loose and it runs. You're not stopping it." Ethan's grip didn't loosen. "If it wanted to run," he said quietly, "it would have tried harder already." That silenced him for a moment. Grace moved a step forward, not interfering, but watching closely. There was no panic in her face, just attention. Careful, measured attention. "Watch the tension," she said softly. "If it snaps wrong, it could lash back." Ethan nodded once, adjusting his position. Sweat gathered at the base of his neck despite the dry air. His hands held steady, but his chest felt tight. Not from effort, but from the weight of everything standing behind him. Not just the men, the expectation, the easy choice. He pulled again. This time the metal gave. A sharp crack split the air, not loud but clean. The broken link dropped against the roots with a dull, final sound. The chain slackened instantly, falling away from the horse's neck in a heavy coil. For a moment, nothing moved. The horse stood exactly where it had been, head still low, body trembling. Not from restraint now, but from the absence of it. The space around its neck had changed, but it didn't yet know what that meant. Ethan let the broken chain fall from his hands. Slowly, he stepped back. No one spoke. The wind moved through the grass again, softer this time, as if the land itself had paused to see what would happen next. The horse lifted its head, its ears turned, not forward, not back, but uncertain. It shifted its weight, testing the ground beneath it. One step, careful, unsteady. No chain pulled it back. It froze. Not from fear of the men, from something deeper. Ethan recognized it immediately. Freedom wasn't always relief. Sometimes it was confusion. Behind him, the older man exhaled sharply. Now what? No one answered him. Carl stared at the broken chain, then at the horse, then back at Ethan. You just made this your problem, he said. Ethan finally turned. It already was, he replied. Carl shook his head, frustration tightening his features. You're taking a risk for something you don't even understand. Ethan held his gaze. No, he said. I'm taking responsibility for something I almost didn't question. That landed differently, not as an argument, as something closer to admission. Grace stepped forward slightly, her voice calm. You all saw the marks. You saw the condition it's in. Whatever story brought you here, this isn't it. The younger man shifted, uncertainty replacing the edge in his posture. So what? We just leave it? Ethan looked back at the horse. It had taken another step now, then another. Not toward the trees, not toward the open field, toward the water bucket. He watched as it lowered its head again, slower this time, drinking without urgency, just enough to steady itself. No, Ethan said quietly. We don't leave it. He turned back to the men. We stop deciding what something is based on what we're told, he said. We start looking at what's actually in front of us. Silence followed. Not agreement. But not resistance either. Carl glanced at the others, then back at Ethan. The certainty that had driven him out here was gone now, replaced by something less defined, harder to act on. We'll keep an eye out, he said finally. If it causes trouble again. It won't, Ethan cut in. Not harsh, but firm. Carl studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Not approval, but not opposition either. The men began to step back, one by one, the tension easing as the purpose that had brought them here unraveled. Engines started again, slower now, less urgent. Doors closed without force. Within minutes, the trucks were gone, leaving only the fading hum of distance behind. The field settled. Ethan stood there a while longer, watching the horse. It finished drinking, then lifted its head, water dripping from its muzzle. It looked at him, not wild, not trusting, but aware, present. That was enough. He didn't move closer, didn't reach out. He simply stood, giving it the space to choose whatever came next. The horse turned slightly, stepping away from the tree. Not running, not fleeing. Just moving. Free. Ethan exhaled slowly, something in his chest loosening. Not completely, not all at once, but enough to feel the difference. Grace came up beside him. You know this isn't the end of it, she said. Ethan nodded. I know. He looked out across the pasture, where the horse now stood at the edge of the open field, undecided but no longer bound. That's not why I did it. Grace studied him, then gave a small nod of her own. Ethan rested his hands on his hips, eyes still on the animal. For the first time since he had seen the chain, he wasn't trying to figure out what had happened before. He was thinking about what came next, and that he realized was a different kind of responsibility altogether. Sometimes the truth isn't hidden. It's ignored because it's easier to believe what everyone else believes. This story reminds us that real courage isn't loud. It's the quiet moment you choose to see clearly and stand alone. If this meant something to you, stay with us. There are more stories waiting to be told.
If this story meant something to you, share your thoughts, word bots, and subscribe to Lion's Quiet Stories.